We're going to look at Asgard. I don't know why I have this. It's one of a few Euros I've picked up. Asgard's Chosen is another one, and there's probably more. In an attempt to try to capture something like Hammer of Thor that's playable. And this shows some intriguing factors to it, so it's why I grabbed it. If you're looking for, hey, how to play from kind of a standard viewpoint, turn away. Go find something else. This is a Callendale video, and you probably don't want to bother if you're not already used to them. So anyway, let's take a look at what we've got. This is, I guess, a sort of a placement, an action placement, maybe worker placement. It's kind of hard to tell. Worker placement fits type of game, which I am notoriously not particularly pleased with the type. I've never played it before. Pulled this out and read the rules and said, hey, why not? You'll notice all the counters are untrimmed and unclipped, and that's an oddity for me. Well, apparently a lot of my Euros didn't get clipped during a period of time, and at this point I'm just like, hey, it's too fucking hot upstairs to keep playing Serbia right now, and so we got to do us some Euros. So, or something else down here, but Euros seemed like the thing. So let's see what we got here. First of all, each player, and it's a 4-player game, but it can hold 2, 2, 3, 4, has a hand with all the different gods represented in it. And those gods are also represented on the board as places where you can put your little workers. You start the game with 3 little worker chits, or influence tokens they're called. I'm not sure what the hell these guys are for. They're sort of spares in case you've run out of all your colored discs, which is possible by the end of the game. You've got standard, hey, wrap around, I got 100 points markers to indicate that. These are player turn order markers. Not really familiar with. They don't seem to get regenerated, so we may just go with seating order. Over here, like I said, you've got a display for each god, and that's going to show what? Yeah, what indeed? It's a good question. Because I'm looking at it and saying, wow, there's a lot of information here. That does not make sense to me. Neat. Okay. I mean, I've made my way through the rules, thought I understood everything, and now I see there's things like this that I'm like, what the fuck? And maybe they happen when you do a god influence action that I didn't know. It's the temple. Request, take 2 enchanted stone tiles of the type found on the god card. That's not all. So I guess that's the representation here. This is what you can do when you trigger that god. Use the skill depicted beside the slot. Here's what I don't got. So outside the rules, there's a whole set of different things that tell you what the little god card information says. And it's spelled out here. So here you get 2 enchanted sword. You may also take 2 warriors of your choice from Valhalla. If there are any in placement in front of yourself, I guess that's this. Okay. That makes sense. and that's the upper slot. The bottom slot, you just get 2 enchantment stones. Bottom slot. Okay. This is when you're doing the request capability. So yeah, so each of these are going to have their own little special rule for them, which was not absolutely apparent until I started looking at, hey, what do you got on the board? Wizardry, population, we know these vaguely. We don't know how you get them. I think you get them by putting a god in the area, but I thought they were just discarded when you did that. So, yeah. What do these mean? Damned if I know. Seriously. There seems to be another space down here that you can put things in, but I don't know that the rules actually cover that. Again, the rules made sense, but then when I start looking at once I started setting up the components, the rules started making more and more sense. But now that I look at the components more carefully, the rules don't make sense. Great. All right. Well, this is what happens when you have picture-filled games that don't tell you the rules straight up. And they really don't do a good job of describing what's going on. I mean, they give you this picture and some other information. But we will try to play our way through it, because I think we understand the core of the game. We just don't know what the fuck this shit means. So, I mean, if we look at Baldur, what does that say? Upper slot, you get 2 yellow enchanted, and you can exchange an enchantment stone, that's this, placing it back with a different one. And the bottom slot, whatever the bottom slot is, I assume that's these. But again, I don't really know, because it's not well spelled out. I probably should have started fiddling with this first. That was my initial intention. But now that I've started videoing, we're going to see why the rules suck. Which was my initial impression. Was I was looking at this and I'm like, great, I'm reading all this crap and it's not really telling me anything about what I'm trying to do. Well, what I'm trying to do, like in many Euros, is I'm trying to accumulate victory points. And I will get those through a number of means. It is something of a point salad. I'll be getting them per turn for temples that I built. I will also get them for winning battles on the worlds. Ysdrigil has these worlds associated with them. By using my god, by devoting my gods to fighting battles on those worlds. And I will also get them when Ragnarok occurs, and that will be based on the points within Ysdrigil itself. And we'll see how this all formulates. Because it's really, like many worker placements, it's a fucking mess that's designed to generate point salad. It doesn't appear to have too much in the way of an engine, although you get victory points every turn for having temples. You get your extra tokens from up here by taking actions in Asgard. With the gods, well, your goal with the gods might be multiple different things, and one of them is to place gods into Ysdrigil and begin to influence what the hell's going on. Some of the gods don't start on the board, notably some evil ones here, which come in at later phases and become available to you. Other pieces that you have, these are light and dark tokens, and by courting certain gods in different ways, you can get these tokens, and then you're going to use them either to buy these back or for other uses. You're allowed to do trade-ins, for example, in Asgard with them. What else? We got recruits, which come in 3 types. Regular warriors, which are worth 1 each, but come in 2 different flavors, either light aligned or dark aligned. And then giants, who are more expensive, but they're worth 2 points each. And you will be associating them with gods, which strengthens the gods that you've got an association with, or you can have them for yourself, and you'll be able to allocate them. You can also collect weaponry and magic, and those also come to you through actions that you take with the populations, and you get you get the ability to allocate them. Now, what about the special skills for each of these? We'll look at them a little later, but so there's like Tyre's skill tile, which you can take, and then you can use it during battle and just declare a victory, for example. So 2 of the gods have a skill tile that's a longer lasting or a delayed effect. The gods are kind of at reverse to each other. So however these are apportioned, whatever the different information is on them, is sort of mirror imaged over here, which can be a little confusing, but that's okay. Not much else I can tell you because now I'm a little befuddled, but let's start going over what is supposed to happen in the game. And let me push the board so that I have room. Okay, so you're going to start with 3 of these tokens that are your actions each turn. And some of them can get left on the board as influence on the gods. You may end up getting more actions as you buy them from here. So there's kind of the things that you spend, and you spend them on the temples. They end up devoted to that god, and you're constantly supporting God. Of course, you're constantly getting victory points, so it's not necessarily a terrible thing. Okay, so for each of your tokens, you choose 1 god card out of the currently available gods, and that won't include the 3 evil gods. You don't have to choose 1 for each. You could reserve a token. There's not really a reason for that I can see. And that god is going to be your action choices, and they're done secretly at this point. Then 1 at a time in player order, and we don't know how player order is determined at the beginning of the game because there's no kind of beginning of the game thing. There's this setup. Each player randomly gets a token, and a player order token, and I don't think they ever change, so I didn't see anything that indicates it. Okay, 1 at a time then, you reveal 1 of the gods you chose, you take 1 of your influence discs, and you can put it either on one of the empty slots, request or temple, okay? Well, we don't know where the request slots are. I don't believe they spell that out anywhere. There may be an arrow in a little picture somewhere. Like I found one thing that I found in the rules, again, they're really bad, is the numbers for the different worlds is written in this little corner. Now that's not spelled out anywhere. It doesn't help you with that, but that's the kind of thing that you have to discover. Basically, the representation in some of the rules are not clearly available to you. So, you can put, and maybe it shows in the example, in some cases it probably does, where it shows, for example, if I'm doing a request, these get put here. Now, in order to understand this, we got to go look at Loki and see what these are. These are like those. So those are the spaces where requests go. Okay. We still don't know what this means. We know what these mean. These are for temples. This space, we don't know. We just don't know. So we'll keep... it might be that there's two different types of request. When he chooses this, he takes 2 enchanted stones and uses the skill depicted besides the slot. Okay. Whatevers. Okay. Yeah, I honestly have no idea what this space is for and cannot find an explanation for it. Okay. So we'll keep looking. Maybe we'll find something out. Okay. So you can put it in either a request space, which is these up here, or a temple space. And you could instead put it up in Asgard itself, in which case you're trying to trigger an Asgard action. One of the major reasons for this is to grab this, but you also get to utilize one of these Asgard tokens if you're one of the first 3 players in there. And the less players there are, the less of certain resources there are. One of those resources that gets reduced is the number of Asgard tokens. It's 1 less than the number of players. Another is the number of worlds that are available to compete on. And that makes sense. It makes the game more competitive. Okay. Then each player does this one at a time until all the God cards of all the players have been revealed. If a player has less God cards available, chosen, than other players, they just have to pass while they're waiting for other players to complete them. Okay, then you do the actions. You pick one, again in player order, you pick one of the tile discs that you placed, and you either, if it's in a request spot, you ask a god for skills and enchanted stones. If it's in a temple spot, you build a temple. Now, building a temple has a cost, and you may have to pre-plan somewhat. So, for example, this temple has a cost of 2 green stones. Well, green stones are most easily gotten from Loki. So, conceivably, I could play on Loki for an action, getting these stones, and then play a temple action on some other god, because I only have 1 Loki card, and generate this temple. And then I'll be generating 3 victory points per turn at the cost of one of my influence gems. This one, likewise, you could do this one. This one a little harder. You'd have to be getting... Well, this one actually is difficult because you'll have to get 2 different colored stones. This one, you'll have to get 2 different colored stones and 3 stones in total. This one, the 7-point temples, and these are 4 different stacks of temples that I think are increasing in value. The 7-point temples, you need 3 different color stones, one of which is the white stones, which are not trivial to get. You may have to trade in to get them. And one of any other kind of stone that you're not already trading in order to do. Okay. When you put a disc in a temple slot, you choose the top god token and you can put it onto a world. And then that, I think, will get you the population that you're replacing. That god is also fighting in that world and can generate you points because of that. If you decide, instead of putting in the request slot or the temple slot, to put in the Asgard spot, then you can get influence discs, for the most part, and you get actions from here. And you can grab effects from the world as well, which is, you can grab a weapon or a wizardry that way, from what I can see. And then eventually everyone will have played all the discs that they committed to their gods. Okay. Then there's a random weapon for both darkness and light that are revealed, and all the battles are conducted in all the different worlds at the level with that modifier in place. So on some turns, maybe light will have the advantage, some turns maybe dark will have the advantage, sometimes maybe they'll be very close. And so you have a randomizer in addition to whatever points that you've committed to a battle. After 5 rounds of this entire sequence have gone by, then we go to the final scoring phase, which is Ragnarok. In Ragnarok itself, the gods will fight to conquer the worlds. In this case, the populations, normally populations are unable to fight the gods. But when Ragnarok comes, they're fighting for the survival of their worlds, so they're actually able to face them. Gods will have warriors and giants to improve their strength, and the players can help them directly with weapons and wizardry. And then the ancient weapons come into play again. Okay. There's rules for the common supply up there. If you're receiving enchanted stones, warriors, giants, seals, or skill tiles, and there aren't enough from the common supply, you take it from the player who owns the most of those. Your choice if there's multiple choices. If you're supposed to take 2 tiles, you take one from the player that owns the most now. One from the player who owned the most the first time, and then one from the player who now owns the most. And it's quite possible that you might be the player who owns the most, and then you won't be able to take. You'll take from yourself. If warriors and giants are all already on the board, you don't get any. And same with seals. They will come from the player with the most. I don't know who gets to choose in that case, but we'll see. When giants are used in battle, they go back beside the board in the common supply. When a warrior is used in battle or is killed, they go to Valhalla. Okay. 3 of the gods aren't in the game to begin with. On the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round, each one of them comes into play. They're not currently in play, but their values of their top tile is visible. At the beginning of the round, there must be one and only one seal beside each of the risen gods. You place a seal from the common supply in the appropriate empty slot beside the risen gods. If there were no seals available, take it from the player who owns the most seals of that color. If it's a tie, the first player always gets to choose who gets boned. Awesome. Glad that's not randomized. Except at the beginning of the game. Okay, at the beginning, at least, maybe we'll see something. But at the beginning of each round except the first, pick the face-down tiles from the Asgard tile row and place them beside the board, and then fill the empty spaces on the row from tiles from the stack. If the stack gets exhausted, you reshuffle and put new ones out there. And there's 3 per turn right now. A player can never have fewer than 2 influence discs in front of himself at the beginning of the round. If he ends up having too few, he can take them, he must take enough so that he's up to 2 from support slots, victory areas, and or the middle of the board. Now the middle of the board is probably pretty safe to take them from. Those are places where you'll be putting into battle again. Other spaces you may not want to because you've invested to get those spaces. All right, into more detail. Each player has 10 cards representing the gods. You take them all in your hand and secretly select which ones you want to influence. And the number of gods you can choose is limited to the number of discs you have. Actually, it's equal. I wonder what happened to my coffee. I guess we're pausing already. At this point, it's pretty damn clear to me that this game did not get blind tested because there's no way a rule set not pointing out what certain things are in an easy to discern fashion. The only way you find some stuff out is by looking at the examples, for example, and then there's other facets as well. It's clearly, was not carefully vetted in a blind testing type situation. Not surprised. Games seem to do that less and less these days. Okay. So, when you reveal a god that you picked, after the cards have been chosen, you reveal a god you picked, then you take one of your influence discs and you can put it in a request spot. Okay, here we go. Request slots are identified. They're up here. That's good. In a temple slot of the corresponding god, aha, that's this. And then the other thing that's available, which I didn't see before, is something called support slots here. Which, when you play, so this is what happens. You place in the temple slot. There's only one of them available. You move to the support slot. And that's going to, okay. And that's going to indicate that you are one of the followers of that god, basically. And you will be getting the points that that god generates. If you're the only one in support of that god, you'll be getting all of the points that god generates. But it may behoove you not to be the only one and to be on the top level of it, in which case you get the higher score. So from all of these areas, when Valhalla happens, when Ragnarok happens, you're going to be scoring as either the first person into that god or the second person invested in that god. And if you're the only person invested in that god, you get the full points. But if two people are working towards a certain god, that may get you certain benefits out of it. Okay. So that's what's going on there. So on your turn when you select actions, you put into the request spot, you put into an empty temple spot, and there's only one temple spot. And see, they make this confusing by making the two mirror images of each other, which is part of the issue here. Or you can just throw it up in the Asgard area. And it can go anywhere, it seems. Okay. Only one influence disc can occupy any request or temple. There's no limit to the number of discs that can be present at the same time in Asgard. An influence disc cannot be moved until the player performs their action. You cannot place your disc in a temple slot if you already have influence on that god. And you cannot place your disc in the temple slot if there are no empty support slots for that god. So 2 of these get filled. Now, there's an interesting thing. Later on in the scoring section for the game, during Ragnarok, it is assumed that there will not be more than 2 tiles for a god out. I don't think that assumption is correct, but we can see. Maybe there's something that forces that. But basically, it's possible that only 2 people... It's quite likely that only 2 people will be in the support spots. But it is possible you could be forced to remove a token from a support slot. And I think that allows a third god card to go out. And that may be a sort of anomalous situation that's not addressed. We'll see. Oh, okay. Once everybody's revealed all their gods, one at a time, then we continue forward to perform actions. At this point, you pick one of the discs that you've placed. It's an expensive way, a complicated way to do the worker placement, right? But it has some hidden facets to it and all kind of neat stuff there. The only problem I have is the player order not changing. I hope I'm wrong about that. You select an influence disc placed on a god's slot. Oh, you know what it may be? Maybe Odin allows you to do that. Because he's got those 1 through 4s. He may also change the order of play. He takes all the player order tiles and redistributes them. He can offer any element that they have in front of him to convince him to give him a certain number. Deals must be respected. Okay, so there is a way to shift the player order. I could see that being really important. Again, not knowing these skills, and they're not spelled out in the rules, they're spelled out in a supplemental document that kind of neglected. Yeah, I kind of expect things like a player aid not to contain the vital rules to the game, right? Okay. But you select an influence disc, you place it on a god's slot. Yeah, one that's already been placed. And if you select a disc placed in a god slot, you take the, if you're the first person to do this, you take the seal placed beside that god here. This is how you gain one of them. If it's still there, and you place it in front of yourself. Then, and this is if it's request or temple, then you perform the corresponding action. If you cannot or do not want to perform the action, you just get your influence disc back, and you're done. But no matter what, you get your influence disc back, or it gets moved to a support slot if you're doing a temple action. Okay. You continue until everybody's picked up all their discs. What happens with the actions? Well, when you do a request action, and that's the upper portion. Can't say upper left, because it's upper right on this side of the board. You get 2 enchanted stone tiles if they have any. And you use the skill depicted beside the slot if they have any. Then you get your disc back and put it in front of yourself. Now I think it's important to discuss all the different skills that come. Okay, Freya, the upper slot gives you 2 enchanted stones and 2 warriors. Balder, the upper slot gives you 2 enchanted stones, and you can exchange enchanted stone, one of them, with a different one of your choice from the common supply. Second player only gets the stones. Odin, upper slot, you get 1 white enchanted stone. Well, why aren't they in his pile? That's an interesting question. Maybe, I don't know. This is very intriguing. So, over in the setup, you don't put any on Odin. You place all of them white beside the board, pink on Freya, blah, blah, blah. In a 3-player game, do this. Okay. I think I don't understand. Okay, so let's look again. You get 2 pink enchanted stones. Why are they on her and not nowhere? I don't know. Okay. It just says you get the stones. When you use the stones, they probably go back to the common area, which may mean that these are tied to these gods until they've been released, until somebody does something with them, or it may not. Nope. The common supply for these gods is on top of the god. Why is Odin different? Don't know. Okay. Well, that's great. And enchanted stones are common supply items, which means if you can't get it, you can take them from someone. Okay. Well, that's great. Let's keep looking. Odin's also able to make deals and trade the player turn order thing. After he distributes, player changes immediately. So after the change, it is the turn of the player who has the number immediately following the one that the active player took for himself. Okay. For Tyr, 2 red stones and the Tyr skill tile. He can use it during the battle phase to declare a victory. Move one of his discs from the battle slot to the victory area without using recruits and regardless of the values of the god population tiles and ancient weapons. Okay. And again, second person to get that just gets a couple of colored tiles. Thor, 2 blue tiles and Thor's skill tile, which he takes from whoever has it. And this is only the person in the upper slot again. He can use it at the end of his turn during phase 2 or 3 to take an entire additional turn following the usual rules. If phase 2, he selects another action by playing a card from his hand and placing a disc. If phase 3, he performs another action by selecting one of his discs. Then he places the tile back in the appropriate space on the board. So basically, you get a one-time chance, just like with this. You get a one-time chance to jump in and do an action twice. Or to do, two iterations of that action, basically. So, for example, if you wanted to get your discs down in important slots to begin with, or if you wanted to remove them in a particular order and activate them. And I guess you could do it right away after you grab it. Yep. That's the even immediately. Okay, and again, just 2 blue stones if you're the second person in there. For Loki, you get 2 green stones and you get a recruit from any god, including Loki, and place it in front of yourself. Is that clear in comparison to Freya? So Freya says 2 warriors from Valhalla. I guess a star means Valhalla. I guess an arrow means a god. Okay. Hel gets 2 black enchanted stones, and you select one god that has at least 1 warrior and gain victory points to the number of recruits there. Okay. Each recruit counts as 1, regardless if it's a giant or warrior. Then you take one of the warriors on that god and put it in Valhalla. You can't take a giant. Giants don't go to Valhalla. And the bottom slot is just 2 stones. Mimir. Now these guys only have 1 slot. Fenris has 2. Let's see. You move a disc to an empty silver request slot. That's these things. Or the Asgard area. You cannot move to the request slot of Odin and to the upper request slot of Fenrir. You will perform the following action during one of your following turns. So it's kind of a wait and see token. Could be useful. Oh, you know what's really interesting about it? It's a wait and see that you can wait until they clear their request space. But the ones you're not allowed to take are marked red. I don't know what this is. I think it's part of that upper slot. Oh no, it's the enchanted stone of your choice. Oh, it's not white. You get white for the upper, you get any color for the lower. Interesting. Okay. Searcher. You select a face-up population tile on Ysdrigel and take its bonus. Then you flip the tile face down. Once flipped, the population tile counts as the indicated value and does not give any bonus when replaced by a god tile. You flip one of these tiles as a player, immediately, respectively, you get an enchanted stone, you get a seal, or you can exchange an enchanted stone with a different enchanted stone of your choice. If you flip one of the others, you follow the rules described above, but you have to use the tile immediately. Okay. Not really sure. If you flip one or the other, you follow the rules described above. See population tiles. Well, population tiles is over here. And these all have their own descriptions that we have not looked at. Okay. Fenrir. If you move your disc to an empty temple slot or to the Asgard area, you will perform the corresponding action during one of your following turns. The bottom slot, you get nothing. Performing the request allows you to take the seal placed beside the god if it's still there and place it in front of yourself. Why would you do that? Because, I mean, the seal is going to go to whoever removes from the first. I can't think of a reason, but maybe there's something. Okay. All right. So once you do an influence, normally you get the token back, your token back. There are a couple of exceptions where it goes somewhere else. So in this case, it goes somewhere else. Okay. Let's go further. Temple. Now, let's just see. Ah! Okay, so here's the deal. You do this. If purple removes their token first, they get the seal. But yellow can remove the token first after placing second. So there's one reason. If you want a black seal, but you can't get first place anywhere, and you think that somebody's going to hold off on playing Fenris's upper slot capability until a temple's available or something. Gotcha. All right, we're going to pause a little bit and swap batteries. So my charger wasn't working. I have almost no power here. So we're going to take a bigger break. The one thing I was going to say, though, was, you know, when I did first look at this, I immediately said, oh, I'm going to want to play through a little bit of this and work out the kinks and see what's going on, because I know Euros tend to not be immediately consumable. Sort of half the game is trying to figure out what the game was actually about, and then, you know, once you play it 2 or 3 times, you put it aside, which should fit well with my style of play, right? But unfortunately it doesn't. But I gotta tell you, I thought it made sense, and now coming to it and seeing what I didn't see here, what I didn't see by fiddling around with the pieces, has put me in a position where I'm like, yeah, I was right. I probably should have tinkered around with it a little bit before playing, just to see, you know, what these things do. You know, how much do these special abilities impact the game? My feeling was they were not that big a deal, but obviously they actually are. No mass. Nobody really cares about my my Euro coverage. So anyway, I'm going to be stuck doing something else for at least an hour or so while the battery charges on one or both of these. I don't know if I must have blocked it from my mind. I guess my wife and I must have played this before, because I gave it a rating. Not a good one. Largely, hey, you know, point salad and worker placement pretty much kills most games for me. But we'll see. you know, maybe it'll make more sense to me playing it solo. Sometimes things do. It certainly was not enjoyable trying to work through these rules and play something, you know, for the first time with someone. The rules are not good. Okay, so we talked about the request already, the things that are done from that. When you do a temple action, you must build a temple. You spend the stones that are required for the temple from one of the 4 stacks that's available, and they go back wherever they came from. And then you put the temple tile in front of yourself. You'll get points from that each round. And if requested, place the recruits taken from your own supply on the god. All gods but Fenrir request recruits. Okay. The requested kind is indicated on the uppermost empty support tile. So here we got 3 different types. What that means is we can choose any type. Now, if the support tile is already covered, you're not fulfilling that one, and you can get by with a cheaper request, actually. So, you must have that type of recruit, and you place all of your pieces of that type onto the god. Now it does say recruit, but if possible, place the topmost god tile on Yggdrasil in a world slot of your choice, following these placement rules. So you'd be taking the tile, which you already know the value of. Only one god tile can be in a single world slot. Okay. If a god tile... These are the slots they're talking about, I believe. A god tile must replace a population tile. A light one if it's a light god, a darkness one if it's a darkness god. If the world is empty, which happens in smaller numbers of players, you can't use it at all. If the population tile has not been flipped, see Surtur's skills, we already caught that, the player takes it and places it in front of himself. Then he can use its bonus once, even immediately. If it's been flipped, though, he discards the tile. Now, I'm guessing using it discards it as well. And at this point, we probably should look at, hey, what those tiles do. If the god tile is placed on a lower world, the player immediately gains 5 victory points. God tiles on lower worlds will participate neither in battles nor in Ragnarok. And we got the note for the victory points there. It looks similar to these, but it's different. Turn the topmost god tile and the topmost temple tile and place them face up. Basically, you show the stack. Now, what happens when you're looking at the population tiles? This one can be used during your turn. You take a weapon tile stack, choose a tile, put it in front of yourself face down, and put the rest of the stack face down. I am assuming when they say choose, you're able to look at them all. Similarly, you can do this one for the wizardry stack. You can use this tile at any time during your turn. You swap your player order tile with the number 1 player order tile. The player order changes immediately, so because the active player has taken number 1, it is now the turn of player number 2. Which, you know, could mean somebody gets turns that are in a row or out of order because of the shuffling. This one, the player can use the tile at any time during his turn. He flips face down one of the Asgard tiles in the row and takes its bonus. The player can use this tile during the battles phase to declare a victory. Move one of his discs from the battle slot to the victory area. We haven't talked about how that happens yet, but we'll get there. Without using recruits and regardless of the values of the god population tiles and ancient weapons. The player can use this tile while performing temple. He can use it as any one enchanted stone when building a temple. You can use this tile when performing temple. You can use any one of your enchanted stones as another one when building the temple. And then this one, you can do it when performing the Asgard action. It counts as one seal of whatever type you like to pull an influence disc when obtaining recruits. All right. Yeah. Then the player moves his influence disc from the temple slot to the uppermost empty support slot. Now here it says, once placed in a support slot, the disc cannot be removed until the end of the game. Okay, you use it up. One of your discs is gone then. The only exception described above at beginning of a round, which is if you have less than 2 discs available to you, you must remove them from the board. And removing them from a temple is probably your worst choice, but all right. If you put a piece in Asgard, you can choose to fire that off. You must flip one of the face-up Asgard tiles, and then you use its bonus. If you don't want to use the bonus, you just flip the tile. If they're already face down, nothing happens. These tiles have different values. These give you recruits of types. So here you can choose any type, but you only get 1. Here you can choose any type to get 2 of, and then you get 1 of another type, a different type of your choice. This allows you to exchange enchanted stones, 1 of them, I guess, with a different enchanted stone from the common supply. And then there's a do nothing, which I don't know if it actually exists, but we'll see. All right. Then you're allowed to buy recruits. For each recruit you want to buy, you spend 1 or 2 light and or darkness seals. That's indicated up here what the cost is. You then take the recruit from the common supply and place it in front of yourself. I assume these are all the exchange rates you can just use. I don't know. You may take an influence disc from the pile up there. This is how you get more actions. You spend a light or darkness seal as indicated below that space. So this could be either. And then you also have to spend equivalent for each non-empty space to your left. So if you're taking the first one, it's just going to cost you the base price. But if anybody else's pieces are in earlier ones, you're going to have to pay for those pieces as well. Now, you're allowed to, and then you place that disc in front of yourself, which means you'll have an action in the next round. Or you can place it on an empty battle spot, which means you'll participate in 1 battle during the battle phase. And you immediately gain a wizardry or weapons tile as indicated on the occupied slot. That's these things. You take the stack, choose a tile, and place it in front of yourself face down, and put the stack back face down next to the board. Only 1 disc can occupy a single battle slot. Only 1 disc can be placed on world number 7, this one that has 2 different battle slots. I don't know what that is. If you cannot place a disc in a battle slot, if you've already got a disc in the victory area of that world. If there are no available battle slots, you can put the disc in front of yourself and nowhere else. If possible, you move each disc of your color placed in the middle of the board and place it on an empty battle slot. Placement rules are the same as before, but you don't get a wizardry or a weapons tile. Now, you can either take an influence disc. This or is, I think, no, that's where you put it. And then you get these others. Player takes back his influence disc from Asgard and places it in front of himself. If a now here's something that looks like it's example, not part of the rules, but I think it actually is part of the rules here. Kind of like this is, maybe. I don't know. Let's use lots of colors and set things off and try to make it as confusing as possible. If you have 2 or more influence discs on the Asgard area, you can perform the actions as usual, 1 per turn. Or you can decide to take back all your discs at the same time, doing only 1 action. In this case, A, B, and D remain the same. However, step C just taking influence discs, is modified. You can take free of charge one and only one influence disc from the influence disc row. You take the leftmost available of your color from the disc row. Placement rules remain the same. Now, this says one or more, so you have to pay for each of them, and you may be clearing, you may be increasing the cost of each of them as you do so if you're leaving other people behind. All right, battles. Before the resolution of battles, each player gains the victory points indicated on whatever temple tiles they have. Then you turn the topmost tile of the ancient weapon stacks. Remember I said these are kind of like pre-programmed, hey, which side is winning the battle this round? And they're going to have numbers on them. Then following the numeration, great, check the worlds where the disc was placed. Now again, they don't tell you where this is. It's this tiny little number over here. And it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You check any worlds where there's a disc in the battle slot. You compare the value of the light side with the value of the darkness side. The winning side has the higher value. The values are calculated depending on what is in the space. If it's 2 population tiles, you add the population tile value to the current corresponding ancient weapon side to see whether dark or light wins. If it's a population and a god tile, the god wins. The other side value is, well, no, it's not guaranteed. The god's value is the god tile and the ancient weapon. The other side is just their ancient weapon. It's not a guarantee. The population does not get involved, though. If it's 2 god tiles, you add the 2 god tile values to their ancient weapon and see which one increases. Okay, if the disc is below the winning side, it's moved to the victory area of the world. Now, the victory area of the world, I think, is kind of just this blank area here. That's what was indicated elsewhere. Okay. It would be really helpful if they dissected the board and told you what all these things mean. It would have been really helpful if I could have done that, but I ran into, oh, geez, this doesn't make sense anymore. But now I kind of have the idea. If the disc is on the losing side, or there's a tie, the owner can use recruits taken from their supply in order to improve the value so they win. Giants have a strength of 2, warriors have a strength of 1. The used warriors go into Valhalla, the used giants go back in the supply, and your disc goes into the victory area of the world if you can get yourself to a win. Once you put a disc in the victory area, you cannot move or remove it until the end of the game, except for the beginning of the round thing. And again, you may not want to. You'll see why. If a disc is placed below the losing side, the one with the lower value, or if there's a tie and the owner cannot or decides not to send recruits, move the disc to the middle of the board. It'll be going into another battle slot next time you do an Asgard action. Now, was there a possibility? There's a possibility of pulling them out if all the battle slots have been filled or whatever. Now, let's look at the placement rules again. On an empty battle slot, only 1 disc can occupy a single battle slot, only 1 disc on the world number. The player cannot place a disc in the battle slot if he already has a disc in the victory area. So you can go fight somewhere someone else has gotten a victory in, from what I can tell. Which seems a little incongruous. I'm worried about what that might mean. Okay. Battle tiles. Now, after all the battles have been completed, each player checks how many discs they have in the victory area. Starting with the player who's in the last place on the victory point track, then second to last, and so on, each one can take battle tiles stacked below the corresponding number. So, if you have 1 disc in the victory areas, you get a 3-point value chart, etc. up there. And you place that in front of yourself face down. If you can't because the stack is exhausted, you can take the highest available lower tile. But if there aren't any lower tiles that are available, you don't get anything for it. In case of a tie in the victory point track, tied players take the ties in the following order. No, following the player order. Gotcha. Okay, and then we get an example that's not in a box, and then more examples that are in a box, again, to try to confuse things. All right. After you do the battle tile, you should be ready to grab a new your hand of cards again and set up for the gods again. Unless it's the 5th round. After the 5th round, you go to Ragnarok. Each player reveals all their battle tiles and scores the points for that. Why weren't you doing it? You know, it's hidden trackable information. Why is this being done? I don't know. All the discs in the middle of the board and on victory areas. Oh, then remove from the board all the discs placed in the middle of the board and on the victory areas and place them outside the board. Do not replace discs placed on support slots. Support being the god slots. They're going to be very important. For a better visualization of which players support which gods, move the discs placed on each god's support slots to below each god on Yggdrasil. If there are 2 discs, stack them, putting the uppermost support slot on top. If the god has 2 god tiles in Yggdrasil, use an extra 1 to 2 wooden discs of the same colors from outside the board for the second one. If there aren't enough wooden discs, use the disc tiles of the player color, and there are a couple of those, so there should be enough. Actually, there's more than a couple because we got these. However, they say if the god has 2 god tiles on Yggdrasil, I believe it's possible to get more than 2 from my reading of the rules. Unlikely, perhaps. Check each world on Yggdrasil one at a time, following their numeration in descending order from 7 to 1. If there's 2 population tiles on the world, just remove them from the board. They're not going to be in Ragnarok. If there's a population and a god tile, place an ancient weapon of the corresponding side face down under the population tile. Now, that's okay because there are less than 5 worlds of each type in existence, right? No. You could run out of these. If nobody is doing anything on the planet, on the worlds, there could be a problem. But if nobody's doing anything on the worlds, the only way there's going to be, yeah. So there are, it would have to be there's a god and a population tile in each place, and there still are too many. You could have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 worlds, and there's only 5 of these. So there could be an issue. We'll see. If there's a population tile and a god, place one ancient weapon. If the stack is exhausted, the population tile won't receive ancient weapons. Okay, so it's covered. Deployment, I think it's an unlikely situation. Take the recruits placed on each god and place them beside the relevant god tile on Yggdrasil, if any. If the god has 2 god tiles on Yggdrasil, again, this could be more, divide the recruits into 2 groups of the same strength, if possible. And the reason it could be more is that somebody had to withdraw their disc. And then there's the capability of, not that disc, one of these discs. I'm used to that side, the mirror image thing. If possible. If the group strengths are not equal, the god tile with the lowest number gets the stronger group. Giants are worth 2 strength points, warriors are worth 1. If a god has no god tiles on Yggdrasil, just remove his recruits from the board. They're not going to count, because the god's not going to be fighting. Then, one at a time in turn order, players that support 1 or more like gods take 1 warrior from Valhalla, if any, and place it beside one of their supported like gods of their choice, or pass. Continue until all players pass. Once a player passes, he can't come back in. I doubt that you'd not want to... Well, there might be reasons that you don't want to load up on your own gods. So I'm not gonna say that. Weaponry and wizardry. In turn order, each player places one weapon or wizardry taken from their own supply face down under a god tile of their choice if they have a disc below that god tile, i.e. they supported it. Continue in turn order until all players have played all their weaponry and wizardry tiles under god tiles, simply skipping anyone who runs out. You can't place them under gods you don't support. Players can neither talk with each other nor show wizardry or weapon tiles. Then check each world one at a time, following their numeration in ascending order this time. The winning side is the one with the higher value. Determine the value with the ancient weapons, wizardry, and weapon tiles. Apply whatever effect there is to the wizardry tile. We haven't touched that yet. Then sum up the value of the god and population tile, any recruits that are involved, and the weapon and ancient weapons tile. In case of a tie, nobody gets the results. If the winner is the population, nobody earns points. But if the winner is a god, if that god is only supported by one person, they get all the points listed for that world. If there's two discs, the one on top gets the larger value, the one on the bottom gets the smaller value. When all the worlds have been checked, the game ends. The winner is the one with the most victory points. In case of a tie, the tied player has the lowest player order tile as the winner. At the moment. Gotta swap batteries. Hit those end of game tiles, and luckily my charger worked this time. Doubles the value of recruits. Can never be higher than double, even if two of this tile has been played. The highest value weapon tile, ancient weapon tile placed under the opponent, does not count when calculating the value. The value of the opponent tile, god or population, does not count. If the god wins, the player with the disc on top scores an additional 10 victory points. If the god wins, the player with the disc on the bottom scores an additional 10. How can you tell? I don't know. Oh, it's got a 2 on it instead of a 1. Interesting. Those two look like they're going to be devastating because you're looking at value at the end. So, what are we thinking right now? Can we analyze this? Because these games are about, like, you can't just sit down and start playing it and trying to figure out what the hell you're doing while you're going. It is kind of the problem. And that's probably what I did. You know, I had not yet learned that intuition and such do not work in these modern Euros. These are all about obfuscating what the game is like so that you can't play it effectively until you've played it a couple of times. And I obviously don't remember much, but let me think about what your values are. So you can get continuing values by getting pieces in here. Those don't seem to go away. You don't get your tokens back, but they sit out here and they count towards battle points, right? Somewhere. Each player now checks how many discs he has in the victory area. Yeah. And there's nothing that you remove them. But there's a limited number of these tiles. So they can be eaten up pretty quickly if people go heavily on these. What else can generate you points? Temples can. They also use up one of your tokens. They generate a fixed income. They seem pretty safe, comparatively, but it may be important to get in here first, and in fact, maybe you can run yourself down to only having 2 discs, well, 1 disc, and get a disc back from one of these worlds where you've won a battle. And then you can either win the battle again and keep rinsing and repeating, or do something else, whatever. The other thing that's going to get you score is the end of the game points, which look like there's a fair amount of points there. But in order to get them, you had to participate in the temple support and dedicated yourself to a god. And once you do that, you may cause other people to shy away from that god because you're in the more valuable position for them. Okay, let's send this up and we'll give it a shot. Maybe I'll see more to it. What I'm not seeing here is what I was hoping for, which is that rich storytelling element that's in Hammer of Thor, or at least is hinted at in it, even if the game doesn't quite develop it. Here, though, I just don't know if I'm going to see that. This feels like this is a point optimization mess. You know, you're trying to place your pieces in a way that will optimize your victory points at the end, in a way that just does not feel, you know, Hammer of Thor, you're going out, if you got Thor or whatever, you're trying to get his pieces together so that he can become the effective fighting machine. Now, in any number of players, you will not be able to get all his stuff in a large enough number of players, because the game holds like 256. You will end up only getting one action and doing nothing, and right. Yeah. But still, if you're playing with very few people, like the game is probably meant to be played with, Hammer of Thor still doesn't give you enough actions to get Thor fully equipped very easily. It might be physically possible. Other characters, though, well, I mean, Thor fully equipped is very potent. Anyway, this doesn't give you that. It doesn't give you these kind of encounters and trying to convince, you know, gods and other creatures to join your side or anything along that line. It is really just an abstract optimization problem. And that was certainly part of my disappointment. Add to that, you know, and I mean, it wasn't designed to be that, but it feels like it was, to some extent, at least my feeling was that this was some attempt to make a more playable type of Euro-ish version of Hammer of Thor. Well, it's not. It is merely a theme pasted on a point generation system. All right, let's send this up.